What's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I'm one of the lead developers behind Silmarillion Total War. Today I've got a 1v1 on Silmarillion, of course. I know I promised I would have a Reforged game out, but I am doing a cinematic intro for it, and I've done it once, and then I just decided that I hated everything, so I've scrapped that, and now I'm doing it again because I want it to be a quality experience for you. It's been a while, and it's kind of a love letter to an older game that I did many years ago, so I want it to be just perfect. So, today, don't feel too bad, I have a 1 versus 1 against Umadcommander. I will put a disclaimer here that says that this game was played on stream, so if you have seen the stream and you're not interested in the tactics and thought processes on my end of the battle, then this might not be the video for you. So with that being said, let's jump into the army compositions. I'm going to be playing as the Dominion of Tol-in-Gaurhoth. I have brought some Throng Sheik Wolfborn. This is the Orcish equivalent of a knight unit. There are currently two HP cavalry units in the game, and this is one of them. They have the best armor and shield values that are available in the Tol-in-Gaurhoth faction, and they can also upgrade their armor, which is unique amongst the wolves of Tol-in-Gaurhoth. As many of them tend towards the medium and the light side of things, these guys are very much a heavy unit, and they can increase that further by +2 with an armor upgrade, which is a little bit more expensive, as just kind of the flavor of their faction is to be lighter. I've also brought 3 units of Scarahai Blood Drinkers operating on my second line. They are armor-piercing axes with a really devastating charge. They also got a little bit of a buff in this public patch, so they are more deadly than ever. I've also brought a Mangonel here, as my opponent is the Philotheran and tends to rely on massed ranks of spear infantry. The Mangonel can be a really, really useful pick. Not only can you make your opponents come to you, but you can deny them one of their greatest strengths, in that they are going to be a little bit more hesitant, especially if you use your Mangonel well, to mass ranks and just try and overwhelm you that way. So it's a really useful thing for getting a lot of kills and a lot of value when facing against certain opponents, such as the Philotheran. My second line is composed of Hishbukraz's Ash Priest. You can see them in there. They are a Nafatoon unit, the only one in the game, so they throw little balls of fire. And they have a 2-handed axe that they can use in close quarters as well. One other thing to note is that they are 3 HP, and they are very, very, very light. They have a minor shield value, but it's not a huge amount. And their armor is like 3 or so they can be focused down with mass missile fire really, really quickly, which is why I have them locked safely inside of this unit of Gijek Skada's Wolfguard. So I've actually gone over the limit with my Gijek Skadas. Normally you're going to see 2. I've actually opted to pay the extra price tag to bring 3. So I've got a line here of solid elite infantry. The Gijek Skadas are the best that Tol-in-Gaurhoth can offer without being a bodyguard unit, so really high tier. Well, for orcs in any case. My first line is composed of Scarahai Longfangs. I've got 3 units of them in my center, and they have some throwing axes that they can use before they get into the fray, and you can get a lot of value off these units in the right circumstances. I've also got 2 units of Hishbukraz's Warband. They're mostly here to do some cavalry hunting and some screening and defending my rear and my flank for any marauding cavalry units if my opponent opts to bring them. But I also can use them as a tar pit. They're pretty good at doing that. They've got good numbers and they're not expensive at all. Out in front, I've brought 2 detachments of Hishbukraz's Howlers. And for those of you unfamiliar with the way that Silmarillion works, we do have a system in place to help you spend some extra money and to diversify your army compositions, wherein you can bring half of a unit for half the price. Only certain units have this available to them, but they're usually important units. So the Hishbukraz's Howlers are locked morale, and they're another really good tar pit unit that you can use in. You can use them in suicidal attacks to like pin enemy units in place, to take advantage of chaos and things like that. So all things considered, the Hishbukraz's Howlers are a really useful unit, but they're not all that deadly, especially compared to some other units like the Gijek Skadas. So this is most of my army here. I've decided to keep a lot of it visible, 90 or so % of it visible, enough there that it's plausible that I have nothing hidden. But of course, I do have a few hidden things. I've got 2 units here of the Laugskaraz Zagulkala, which are a medium cavalry. Unfortunately, there's no tag for medium cavalry, so they get lumped into heavy. And they have an armor-piercing charge, unlike many of the other units that we've seen so far. Except for the Throng Sheik Wolfborn, they do have an armor-piercing charge. but they're one of two in the Dominion of Tolian Gauderhoth that can do that, and they're really expendable. They're unshielded, they don't really last all that long in combat, but they have good damage values and really good charge values as well. So you can use them sort of as a makeshift Lancer in a lot of ways. Rear charges, tying down enemy cavalry, going for favorable exchanges with other heavy cavalry can be some really strong uses of the Laugskraz. In the back here, I've got two detachments of the Hishbukraz Agulkalab, so this is a half-strength unit that I paid half for. And the Hishbukraz have armor-piercing flaming projectiles. Not something that you want to play around with. They can also affect the morale of units that they hit, giving it a -2 debuff, so you can use them for starting routes, which is something that the Hishbukraz Tolian Gauderhoth is pretty good at. They have a lot of fire units. They have the Mangonel, they have the Hishbukraz Agulkalab, they've got the Ash Priest, and their Hishbukraz, I think they're like Hunting Party or something like that. It's a low-tier archer unit. They also have a fiery projectile, so there is the possibility for wreaking havoc on your enemy's morale when you're playing as the Wolves of Tolian Gauderhoth. Well, that's going to do for my army. Let's go ahead and see what my opponent has brought to the battle today, and he's got a ton of infantry. Many of them are spearmen, so it's going to behoove us to be careful with how we choose to reveal our cavalry. So I will have a strategy moving into this, and I'll explain that as we go through, because there's just so much anti-cavalry here. If we were to bring them out, especially with all the missiles and stuff, we would just lose them almost immediately. So you really got to be careful with how you use them in this matchup. He's got some Marines of Berthambar. I believe he's got 3 units of them. They have a non-armor piercing projectile, but massed ranks of them. The fact that you can bring, I think, up to like 4 or 5 of them in total means that you can do a lot of damage to light infantry, which is something that Tolian Gauderhoth tends to specialize in. So they're definitely a big threat to us, and we're going to have to be careful about how we approach them. He's also brought some Rangers of Berthambar. I believe he has 2 units of Rangers of Berthambar, or 1 unit and a detachment. But he does have a range presence here. 2 units of Nobles of Balar. These are a 2-handed spear unit, and they have really, really good range and very high melee defense. This is not a unit that you want to go toe-to-toe with, unless you've got, say, halberds, or you've got something with range, or a lot of things with slashing damage that you can use to kind of surround them, because straight on, fighting the Nobles of Balar is going to be really, really tough, especially for Tolian Gauderhoth, whose infantry is not nearly at the quality of Angband's. Also have some Spear Hosts of Berthambar here, just a low-tier spear unit, or not low-tier, but like mid-tier. There's no low-tier units in the Elves, it's just mid-tier. So these are kind of a lower mid-tier regular spear unit. It pretty well does what's advertised on the tin. Second company of them right here. This one is actually going to be a detachment. He's also brought some Marksmen of Balar, really good units. The Marksmen of Balar and the Nobles of Balar in particular have a little bit higher unit size than most high-tier infantry units, especially for the elves, and they can also upgrade their armor. It's not cheap, but you can do it, and they become very, very tanky when you do. So these are definitely priority units for the Philothran. Very, very strong. They make a good second line. Over here we have the Erain Ephedun. This is the personal retinue of Círdan himself. I really actually like this model. I spent a lot of time putting it together. Big fan, and I think that this is going to be where the general's hanging out. So yes, the Erain Ephedun are his general's bodyguard. He's also got some Foresters of Berthambar mixed in with some more Spear Hosts of Berthambar. The Foresters, it is important to note, are a 2-handed spear, but they don't fight in formation. You may be wondering what the purpose of this unit is. It is able to hide anywhere, and you can use them as a screen, an anti-cavalry screen, or as flanking units, or as fodder, whatever you decide you want to use them for. They can be very, very strong in that role. They can be a good tar pit. You can use them to chase down cavalry and just make your opponent's lives very, very miserable. And given the amount of spears that the Philothran can bring, having an extra unit of spears, it can almost make you into an impenetrable porcupine if you have enough of these units, especially when fighting against cavalry-focused factions like ours, for example. Over here, Rangers of Berthambar. Again, it's just a low-tier or a lower mid-tier archer unit, but when you bring them en masse, which you can certainly do, in tandem with the detachments as well, then they can be a pretty formidable force on the battlefield. But that, I think, is going to do for army compositions. Let's go ahead and jump into the battle. Hope you guys enjoy it. So the intent with my deployment here is to avoid a lot of the choke points in the center that are favorable to the Philothrum. See, there's only so many ways that I can go through here. There are lots of points around, like I could try and go around this way, but if I were to fight in the center, I would really be playing into the Philothrum's hands, which obviously was something that I didn't want to do, especially against the Nobles of Balar. It is very, very likely that I would just be stonewalled and absolutely destroyed. So by deploying outside, I deny him that terrain advantage and force him to potentially fight over here where it's a little bit more open, and some of my units can get bonuses in the forest as well. So this is my sort of ideal terrain in a 1v1 versus the Philothrum, and the tree cover does kind of obscure as well the movements of my cavalry, so that's something that I can use to my advantage as well. So what I'm going to do here is start to bring my mangonel forward. Go ahead and turn things up here because it does start a little bit slow. So I've got my mangonel here, and I want to take pot shots and try and get as much value off of the mangonel as I possibly can. There's a lot of juicy targets here, the Nobles of Balar in particular. You can see a unit of them right here. If I could get a good shot into them and wipe out, 10 or like 20 men from a unit, that's really great value. These are super important units, and they really do help kind of even the odds here against Tulin Gauhath, which has a lot of slashing damage. So the fact that, ooh, yeah, a minor hit there onto the Rangers of Berthombar. Managed to take down about 13 or so of them. But as I was saying, Tulin Gauhath has a lot of slashing damage, and in Silmarillion there are, well, in Medieval 2 in general, there are a couple different damage types, and piercing damage is what I use for spears, and it takes a melee defense penalty against units that use the slashing damage, so you're more likely to do damage as a slashing unit to a piercing unit. And the elves of the Phalas have a lot of spears and therefore a lot of piercing damage. So the Nobles of Balar therefore are able to kind of mitigate that somewhat by having really high range on their unit. So if I throw like a unit of Wolfguard into the front of them, they won't even be able to get close enough to hurt them. Whereas the Nobles of Balar will be using their spear wall formation, which gives them extra attacks from the second and third ranks. So they just turn into a meat grinder really, really quickly, and it does mitigate somewhat the slashing penalty that they'd otherwise suffer. Ooh, I got a decent enough shot here, but unfortunately I missed them entirely. Like, if this had gone down to the center of the unit, I would have wiped out like 50 or so of those Rangers, because they are in close formation like this. But unfortunately, Lady Luck was not with me that day, and I only managed to cook some of the officers from the unit, which, that's nice, I guess. There's one lone officer still remaining, but yeah, the officers don't really fire, so I haven't really hampered their ability to deal damage to me quickly. I'm going to go ahead and keep it in 2x speed here. The mangonel, not a lot gets done with my mangonel in terms of its ammunition, but it does become a little bit important later. Yeah, look at that. Look at that beautiful shot there. 15 or so of them died. And as they shuffle, they'll move into the fire, and the fire on the ground after, I think it lasts for about 3 to 5 seconds, is still deadly. So if units shuffle into it or they walk into it, for example, if you use your mangonels on an army that is advancing and they walk into the fire, you're going to deal additional casualties, which is something I don't think a lot of people will realize. There we go. Managed to do some damage to them there. Nobles of Balar moving forward. I think this was actually a bit of a misclick. I was on stream with Umad while he was doing this, and yeah, I definitely did mean to move these Nobles of Balar in here. Moving them out of that tree line and closer to my mangonel in close formation like this does make them a bit of a target, but he was already moving, and it's hard for artillery to be able to hit a moving target, so I didn't even bother to try and fire at him. Let's see what's going on here. So I think this is almost the point where I'm out of ammunition. Yeah, we got one last kind of shot here. It's not going to hit anybody. Very unfortunate for us indeed. Didn't get high enough to... There's a delay on the burst, so a projectile has to be flying through the air for a certain period of time before it's able to burst into that shower of fire that we saw a little bit earlier. So if they're right in front of us like this and you don't choose the right target that's the right distance away, your mangonel is going to work a little bit differently. So yeah, it's something you have to be aware of. I think at this point I am out of ammunition, so what I'm going to do is try and get my mangonel to go into the forest. And this is something that I didn't tell Umad. We were just doing like a friendly battle, and I was like, I might just be like, oh, now my mangonel's out of ammunition. But I decided not to. I thought maybe we'd play this a little bit more cannily. So what I'm going to do with my mangonel is move it here and put it in a position that's vulnerable. And now the mangonel potentially has a lot of destructive power. So if he doesn't realize I'm out of ammunition, then he might kind of take the bait here and leave this really strong defensive position, and maybe we'll be able to kind of sucker him into a spot here in the trees. Because as you'll recall from earlier, I do want to fight in the tree line. There are some inherent bonuses for my units that will kick in once we fight in the tree area, but there's also the canopy obscuring somewhat the movement of my army, which is something that I can use to great effect. So I really want to pull him out here and force him to come and get my mangonel. And more importantly, if I can push him to using his missile units like the Marines of Berthambar, which, as I mentioned, can be very strong against my army, or his rangers as well. If I can eat up that ammunition and that manpower trying to take my mangonel, which is really not of any more use to me, then that's obviously a huge win for me. And I don't want to move out my cavalry, my Laugskaraz and my Hishburgkaraz, until I'm able to neutralize his ranged units in one way or another. A concentrated volley, even like 2 to 3 volleys, would really sap the manpower, or orc power, I suppose, of my my cavalry units that are hidden. So I want to avoid that at all costs. You can see a little bit of damage being done here by those by both the Rangers and the Marines of Berthambar. They're focusing down on my mangonel, which is exactly what I want. So having these, you can hear a lot of like different kind of collision sounds, and a lot of that is the projectiles hitting the mangonel. So I can use the mangonel as a shield and use that to try and soak up some of his ammunition, and that's a big part of my strategy here. Go ahead and kick that into full speed. And I don't want my mangonel to just be swept away by a sally from 2 or 3 units. I want the whole army to come forward. So I brought my army forward here. I've got my Hishbulkraz out front. The rest of my units are conveniently out of range. These are the units that I care very, very little about. And I've also brought my Throngsheet Wolfborn here. And I'm going to go and park them in the woods so that they can become hidden. So hiding in this tree line here with the forest terrain will allow these units to become hidden. You can see them that they're now hiding. You can see him beginning to maneuver some of his troops. So I think I took this as a sign that Umad was preparing to attack. So moving this this layered defense, this defense in depth approach, which is really it's the way you want to play the Philothrim. So I'm kind of reading the body language of his army a little bit and preparing to weather that assault, because the elves of the Phalas on the offensive, it can still be really scary, especially with those polearms. The polearms allow them to just bully your units around, and wherever they are and you're not able to surround them or focus them down with projectiles or what have you, they're scary. And there's not a lot of answers for Unholy Gauderhat's missile, or not missile line, but infantry line in general. So I'm still using my mangonel, still trying to make it be a threat, because he hasn't really pulled out of here as much as I want him to. So I'm trying to use my mangonel to kind of force his hand a little bit, as much as I'm able to. So I'm trying to shoot these units, but the secondary fire for the mangonel is accurate and deadly only against battlements. So the mangonel is a bit of a hybrid engine. You've got the fire shot, which is obviously very powerful against infantry, but if you're using that against battlements, it's not going to do anything. It does next to no damage. But the secondary shot is basically a trebuchet shot. It's very accurate against walls, but against infantry, it's pretty terrible. We can see that here. We're firing almost directly into these nobles of Valar from maybe like 100 or 200 meters away, and we're not able to hit them at all. So it's a little bit sad there, but the fact that my mangonel is still here, being an irritant, soaking up this ammunition, that's really what matters to me. So we got those 2 units of rangers in the back here, looking a little bit ragged. They are now out of ammunition. I believe these guys are as well, so now the real fun can begin. And you can see the Rangers of Berthambar moving forward, and they're going to advance under a screen of Marines of Berthambar. And so this, I kind of realize, is the moment that I've been waiting for. So what I'm going to do first is send my Hishbulkraz Howlers, leave my mangonel there to kind of just be a pain and be in the fray and hold people up. You can see some more units coming out of the woodwork for Marines of Brathambar, all these other scary things. And I'm going to throw my Hishpokraz Howlers forward because I want them to get in there and tar pit. I want them to just be irritating. So there's still a goodly number of them remaining. Hishpokraz Howlers here pushing forward. And at the same time, I'm going to advance with my Scatterhigh Longfangs and try and get some value off of their projectiles. Big boom there. And you can see the Hishpokraz Howlers are obviously going to lose this fight. Nobles of Balar are in here as well. But we have our hand-thrown projectiles, and they're scything through the lightly armored units, and certainly they are also a danger to the Nobles of Balar, although they're not directly in the line of fire. So some more damage being done here, and we're just kind of tar-pitting on the line. And then I've got my second, third, and ultimately my fourth line still to go. So we're just going to come at him in waves. In the back, I've activated my 2 units of Hishpokraz Gulkalab, and I'm going to go after the Nobles of Balar, try and soften them up. So you can see that Umad has moved in with his Foresters as well. The Foresters, being light infantry, are a good deal faster than the Nobles of Balar. So they're much more able to hunt down my Hishpokraz, whereas the Nobles are a good deal slower, being heavy infantry and being in their spear wall formation. And so they makes them a little bit of an easier target. A decent amount of damage being done there. These Hishpokraz detachments are super cheap, so really any damage that I can do to this Noble of Balar unit is a good thing for me. More and more Philothra moving in. My second line has now engaged. You can see my Scatterhigh Longfangs here, holding the line. I'm activating my Gijak Scatai's Wolf Guard just to move them to problem areas. I don't want to commit everybody all at once. I do want to wear these guys down. So Gijak Scatai's Wolf Guard being committed against the Arankir Lim is a good engagement for them. The Arankir Lim are some of the few heavily armored units from the Philothrim, and the Gijak Scatai's Wolf Guard have armor-piercing damage, so they're going to be able to trade reasonably well with the Arankir Lim, although the Arankir Lim will ultimately win out. As I said earlier, the Tolkien Gauntlet infantry is not amazing. They're mostly there to act as a decent enough anvil to the hammer of your cavalry. Ash Priests moving in here. I see a good opportunity for them to use their fiery projectile. Go ahead and slow things down just a little bit. And this fire is also going to affect the morale of these units, so we're trying to target down the Nobles of Balar, but there's so many of them in here. And actually, I forgot one of his units. We have the Mariners of Eärendil, which are essentially a regiment of renown in Silmarillion Total War. We do have a system for regiments of renown, and they tend to fulfill some very specific roles. In the case of the Mariners of Eärendil, they are excellent morale sticks, essentially, as well as decent enough mid-tier infantrymen. So we're getting a lot of value off these units here. There's the Nobles of Balar and the Mariners of Eärendil, and they're all packed in here in a nice little tight, compact blob, and we're going to be able to take advantage of that with our Ash Priests. Over on the wings here, you can see these Spears of Brathambar beating down our Hishpokraz warband. That's okay. They're really just here, since my opponent has no cavalry, at least none that I can see. They're just here to tar pit. And then, of course, I've got my other units here. I'm waiting for him to break through on my left wing so that I can get a good charge off with my Scatterhigh Blood Drinkers. And again, we're matching piercing damage against the slashing damage of the Blood Drinkers. So with that charge, we will be able to wipe out this unit in fairly short order. Over here in the center, things aren't looking so great. Scatterhigh Longfangs and the Wolf Guard doing their best to hold back this massive Philothrim infantry, but we are having a hard time. Scatterhigh Longfangs here coming in from the flank out of ammunition. We're going to try to surround them and bog them down for as long as we can. And now over here I've activated my Laugskaraz, and now the real party can begin in the back lines. Umadcommander, I don't think realized that I had as much cavalry as I did, which is exactly what I wanted to convey by putting so much of my army out there in the field and keeping all of it together. I didn't want him to think that I had some hidden units, but of course the War-Torn Plains map is varied in its terrain, so there's a lot of potential options and strategies that you can use when you're playing on it, which is why I like it so much. Over here, Marines of Brathambar beating down my warband, but again, they're just tar-pitting. They're just here to be kind of irritating. I think I've also done a few cheeky charges with my Thrung Sheik Warlords, and they're around here somewhere. I'm sure we'll see them in just a little bit. But in the center, he is beating me handily. Now, I've got another line of Wolf Guard here ready to throw in. Their presence nearby will also inspire the units that are already here. So the Scarlet High Longfangs, the Mangonel crew, etc., etc., they're going to stay in the fray for longer, just given the fact that my Wolf Guard even exists. So it looks like we managed to have a breakthrough here. So my line of Wolf Guard is actually going to be engaged and bogged down for the time being. But the Foresters of Berthombar are really going to be in a bad position. There's Ash Priests there, mixed in with my Gijek Scout as Wolf Guard, so these units will fall away very, very quickly. But there's a lot of concentration of force here on the wings. What do we have in the back here? Got my my Wolfborn preying on the Rangers and on the Marines as well, who don't have any anti-cavalry bonuses. And he's moving in with his Rhine Efedun to try and shut down my my assault on his back lines. But we have enough works here that we can kind of pull him out of position and attack him in several different places at once. So the Marksmen of Balar here getting charged down. Not going to do a ton, and they are going to get caught up with the Nobles of Balar, but it is going to give me the opportunity here to charge into the rear of these Berthombar Marines. And we're going to do about a fifth of their unit strength off the charge, which is really, really good. So you can see kind of the strength of the Laugskaraz Agul Kalab. They're not necessarily something that you want to throw in on the front lines immediately, but when used well with as kind of a lower tier Lancer, I suppose, or as a melee cavalry tar pit, they can do very, very well and pay for themselves quickly. Now over here, Laugskaraz going for another charge against the Marksmen of Balar. Going to catch them on the flank. We will actually be able to kill a decent amount of them. It is going to put us in a compromised position, as the Nobles of Balar are going to be able to sandwich us if we don't pull them out quickly. But we are able to shut down this missile unit and do some damage to their high-tier infantry, which is always nice for us. Laugskaraz Agul Kalab pulling out of that fight as the Foresters of Berthombar were nearby. They've taken some fairly heavy casualties, but the damage they've done to the Marines of Berthombar is significant. Over here, got my Wolfborn. They're just kind of hiding. I wanted them to just sit here for a minute, and so he'd like forget about them, because the Rhine Efedun are right there. And now they're going to go back to the fray, and then we're going to activate our Throng Sheik again. You can see them beginning to move, but I think Umad saw them right away, or either that or he's going after some of my Laugskaraz. So the Laugskaraz here actually route off, pinned between the Nobles of Balar and the Marksmen of Balar. It's not really where they want to be, but again, we've disrupted his back line, and that's kind of the whole purpose here behind this attack. So Foresters of Berthombar still around, still marauding. I've brought in, I think, my Hishbukraz units here, the ones that managed to survive. And one of them I've actually brought over in this direction. I believe they still have some ammunition, and we're probably going to target down the Nobles of Balar, as again, these are the high priority targets for this Velothran build. Rhine Efedun doing their best to screen, but unfortunately his spear units can't be everywhere at once. And because he's committed so heavily to his front lines, we're going to be able to take advantage of that. So over here, Spear Host of Berthombar, fighting with my Scar High Blood Drinkers. I want to keep them kind of healthy, and I also want to free them up for attacks on this this big blob here. So I'm going to use my Hishbuk or my Throng Sheik units coming from the rear, and that'll rout them off pretty well quickly. So that unit is now basically done for. Over here, things are looking difficult for us. We got Ash Priests fighting hard against the Aran Lim. Because they are relentless and they have armor-piercing damage, they're actually a really good unit to throw at the Aran Lim. And I think I'm going to maybe shift some of my Wolf Guard over here to try and support them, make sure the unit doesn't get killed off. That is, of course, where my general is, and if I lose my general, things can go pear-shaped really quickly. In the center, the Philothrum is starting to thin out a little bit. Now I've thrown in my final line of Blood Drinkers against them, so they're going to be able to do very well against these spear units and these archers in close quarters. And what do we have here? Got some Marksmen of Balar, and they're going to focus down my Hishbukraz units, who, again, of course, going after those nobles. Like I didn't even feel it. Didn't even feel it, and that unit is basically going to expire in short order. And so it's a fairly close battle. He's actually ahead of me by about 13% or so, which is kind of to be expected, given that my Orc infantry is not amazing. So I've got my Blood Drinkers here moving in to engage the Rhine Efedun. Now, they're not multiple HP, and the Rhine Efedun have massive melee defense bonuses, but of course there is the slashing penalty to keep in mind, and the Blood Drinkers are armor piercing. So I got my Throng Sheik Wolfborn here. A little bit of a misplay here. I think I was moving them and I didn't realize exactly where they were position-wise, and I ended up putting them into the Rhine Efedun. But thankfully, due to their fairly loose formation and the fact that I had some infantry present to tie them down, I am going to be able to get them out of there with relatively few casualties. Although, of course, I need to be careful about them being next to the Nobles of Balar. That's something to be afraid of, but in the back here, this is where it gets ugly. So my Gijek Skada's Wolfguard have managed to break through a pocket here in the center, and so I've moved them in to engage his line. I got Foresters of Brathambar here. Ooh, they're going to catch out my Laugskadas, who are still very healthy. But I've also flanked around with a healthy unit of Skadahide Blood Drinkers, full strength in fact. And I was going to try to use them to tie down the Foresters so that I could set up a rear charge with my wargs, but unfortunately the point A happened before B, and my Laugskadas ended up being locked in battle here with two-handed spears, and they're going to die very, very quickly. You can see the casualties beginning to mount. So yeah, big misplay there on my part. Let's see what we got here. Got some Hishbukraz units trying to pull through, threatening the Marines of Brathambar. They might take a surround penalty and begin to rout off. The Arankir Lim and all of these Philothrum units have started to run out of steam here now that my final line has been engaged. So I've worn him down with multiple waves of enemies, and I'm starting to win out a little bit there. But actually this is from his wing. These units have now converged on the center. They're attacking the rear of my Blood Drinker, so I'm in a little bit of trouble on the in the infantry fight. I've got Laugskadas here going for some cheeky charges, trying to get after the Mariners of Erendil and avoid the two-handed spears as much as possible. But I've managed to basically eat his entire back line at this point. So there's some Nobles of Balar trying to stop me, but my cav has basically run roughshod over him. So I've got Wolfguard in there, 62 of them, and a bunch of Blood Drinkers as well who have managed to surround these units. Gonna go for a rear charge here with the Laugskadas. It's not going to be too effective. We'll get a few of the units, but again, you don't want to leave your Laugskadas in there for too long. Throngshik Wolfborn here, going for the center, going for these Spear Host units, trying to free up some of these guys so that I can switch my Blood Drinkers around and try to surround him again in turn with my units on his back line and, of course, with my Blood Drinkers here. Throngshik Wolfborn getting out of there as quick as possible. I think over on the wing, we've got the Alain Ephedun. We're doing well. They are taking some damage from my Blood Drinkers, but because they're just head and shoulders above. I was going to say arms and legs, but head and shoulders above the Blood Drinkers in terms of quality. Nonetheless, they are going to win out in this fight. But there is attrition going on, so that's important. So I've got my Laugskadas here. What remains of them, they are also armor-piercing. So I'm going to take them and throw them at the rear of the Alain Ephedun and kind of hope that he doesn't see it. But unfortunately, Umad does. He's going to turn around to face these guys. We'll maybe get a few kills there. I think turning around and turning his backs to the Blood Drinkers really shot his casualties through the roof. So we are managing to grind down that unit with our very meager resources. Throngshik Wolfborn here, trying to go for some charges against the Mariners of Erendil. I know they're an important part of his remaining morale buffing units, so if I can wipe them out or rout them very, very quickly, then that is obviously going to be an important step in managing to break down this blob here and maybe start to have some of them flee. So I'm basically out of cavalry at this point, but I do have a few things going for me, so let's go ahead, and slow things down just a little bit here. I've got a good amount of Blood Drinkers here that are beating down the Foresters of Brathambar. I've still got a decent number of Blood Drinkers here as well, and I've got, of course, my cavalry units that I can use as a very deadly hammer. A little bit of misdirection here. I wanted to make it look like I was going to go for the Alain Ephedun, but then I turned my unit around here, and I'm going to make them go after the Mariners of Erendil. And they're trying to escape from my Gijek Skada's Wolfguard, who are holding them down. And at the last moment, Umad is going to read the writing on the wall, and he's going to turn that unit around. And they will get their full melee defense bonus from the front. So I'm not going to be able to kill too many of them there. Just about 6 of them. My Throngshik Wolfborn, still the scariest unit left on the field. If this came down to an infantry fight between myself and Umad, it would be game over for me, basically. So my Ash Priests have managed to rally around my Blood Drinkers here, and they're going to fight harder in the presence of those dark creatures. I'm moving in with some Hishbukraz Warband. Again, just trying to get some kind of surround here. Maybe break the units if I can. The Forces of Brathambar have held out, and they've struggled mightily against my Scarhide Blood Drinkers, managing to kill off about 40 of them. but unfortunately, they're just not the unit that's needed to defeat a unit of Blood Drinkers. And so they're going to fall apart in just a few moments here. And that's going to make me free to fully encircle Umad. I'm going to leave the back open here so that I can continuously charge in with my Throng Sheik Wolfborn. So my Hishbukra is going for a cheeky charge here against the rear of the Erain Efedun. His general is still alive, but this unit is in tatters at this point. It went down from 40 to 18. Really sucks for them. Still have some Blood Drinkers here, and they're another one getting hacked down there, so they're now down to 17. But yeah, I've still got these Blood Drinkers, and between them and the Hishbukras, I might actually be able to destroy that unit of Erain Efedun. My Blood Drinkers now breaking cover from the forest, going after his general's bodyguard. Throng Sheik Wolfborn down to 13. Blood Drinkers moving in, trying to get a nice charge here against the Mariners of Eärendil. And at the same time, my Throng Sheik Wolfborn going hard as well. And now the Mariners are in trouble. Big, big trouble. The Scarahide Blood Drinkers are not amazing with their very low melee defense and only middling armor value of 6, but damn is their damage painful. And the Mariners of Eärendil here are really, really struggling, and there's just so many of them left over. So Umad is going to rally here. We got some Marines of Berthambar who turned around and came back, but I will see it, and I will countercharge with my Blood Drinkers, and you're going to see those Marines take damage very, very quickly indeed. And I can see as Erain Efedun is kind of moving into the center of the formation here, trying to lend his morale buff to all of his units to keep them in the fray. So I'm going to take advantage of that, go around the rear of these Marines here with my Throng Sheik Wolfborn. And we're going to charge down into that light infantry, and it's going to be a slaughterhouse. However, you can see the morale buffing capability of these Philothrum units here. They have both the Mariners of Eärendil and their general in the Erain Efedun. And that's actually going to keep these Marines of Berthambar in a fight that you would have expected them to rout from. There we go. One final charge there is going to be enough. And then the Philothrum in the center here, there's still a decent number of them. His high-tier units have survived all the way to the end, which is certainly a testament to their fighting prowess. The Arankir-Lim and the Nobles of Balar rallying around each other. The small pocket of resistance, however, is probably not going to be enough. If we look at the percentage here, though, it's still very close, although I have started to pull ahead now by about 3%. Move forward with the Throng Sheik now. I think the intention here is to try and get at the rear of the Nobles of Balar and rout them off, if I'm able. Oh, no, I think we're going to go for a rear charge here against the Mariners. Ooh, that's going to hurt. That might be enough to kill him off. Not quite, but it is going to do more damage, and this fight is basically decided. The Blood Drinkers will be able to take that just through sheer weight of numbers. And now we're going to go after the Nobles. There's a possibility of routing them here if we can get a good charge, and if Umad doesn't see it. Again, the tree line does make that a possibility. Big boom there. And now, pinned between my Blood Drinkers and my Ash Priests, who have managed to slowly but surely carve their way through the remaining Philothrum, this is going to be a very, very narrow victory for the Wolves of Tolian Gaurha. So you're seeing some routing there of the last few pockets of resistance. The Arankir-Lim now and the Mariners of Eärendil have been beaten down. You can see their final stand here sort of at the bottom of the screen. A really good battle. We were closer in numbers, I think, than you would expect from a Orc army facing down an Elven army, but the Philothrum are very high on their numbers, and the Wargs of Tolian Gaurha tend to be a little bit lower. Their units are kind of better in like fighting skill, but not in armor, than the Angband equivalents, but because I brought so many detachments and so much cavalry, I had 5 units of cavalry in total, my numbers are going to be a little bit lower. But we managed to use them well, even though we lost basically all of our army. It says 548 men remaining, but this should be, I think, an indicator to you about how much the screen can lie. So what happens here is that you're going to get casualties healed, right? So there's hundreds of casualties that I'm going to get back that will be counted in this screen right here. But in reality, I maybe had 100 men remaining at best, so it was a really close game. Ash Priest did amazing, 369 kills, Blood Drinkers getting 222, 185 on the other Blood Drinker unit, 197 on them, so this is where most of my infantry kills came from. And then if we go down here, we can take a look at the Throng Sheik Wolfborn, who got a decent amount, 160 is 168. One of the Wolf Guard managed to do well, but a lot of them were just kind of there to hold the line, so 50 and 60 is about what I would expect from them. The Warband, surprisingly the Warband did well. I think they were paired against a Spear unit in one case, so that's probably why. And my other wargs here, the Laugskaraz did reasonably well. The Hishbukaraz, they were just kind of there for harassment. And at the end I ended up using them to charge down some Arain Efedun, which was really nice. But all things considered, that's about what you would expect from a Tolin Gaudhoth army. I think it does show the strengths of the Dominion of Tolin Gaudhoth. I really had to use my cavalry there. If I didn't have my cavalry and I wasn't able to like overwhelm him with like waves and waves of infantry and keep him committed, which would let me use my cavalry well, then I would have just crumbled. So not having my Ash Priest or losing my general would have been a really bad thing. I could have ended up losing that battle outright. If Umadcommander had some cavalry, now the Philothrum do have some units of high tier cavalry. If he had brought one unit of cavalry, it might have been a different game as well, depending on how I was able to deal with them. But I certainly wouldn't have been able to quite so readily use my Hishbukaraz Warband, the Spear unit, as a tar pit to hold down his units, so I wouldn't have been able to kind of keep those units in check and keep the various elements of his army from being able to support each other. And I would have needed to use them to try and hunt down some of his cavalry. I wouldn't have been able to use my warlords nearly as offensively either. So I was able to basically picket his backlines unopposed, and he has enough spear units that he can, make that difficult for me, but he had committed so heavily in the center and like needed to, because I had so many waves of infantry coming at him, they didn't really have a choice. He just wasn't able to use his spear units to kind of form that defensive porcupine that the Philothrum can sometimes do, to zone up my cavalry almost indefinitely while he grinds away the infantry fight and ultimately wins. So it was a really good game. Fantastic job to Umad. Again, we did do this game on stream, so if you're at this point and you're like, hey, wait a second, I've seen this. Yeah, it's because you have. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this. I will have a Reforged game out very, very soon for you, but again, I just want to continue working on that and making sure that it's a quality piece of work. So, in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this 1v1, and I hope you join me for whatever comes next.